Chapter 747. Luo Nan held a relatively cautious attitude toward the results of psychic communication with extraordinaries. In the past few months, Luo Nan, Mr. Bai, Gao Tianshi, and even Old Yu had discussed psychic techniques. The three seniors had pointed out very seriously that psychic techniques could provide foresight, but it was very likely that one would suffer a backlash. Whether it was in the legends of ancient times or on the plane of reality, psychics who forcefully peered into the secrets of heaven through psychic and divination techniques could basically write a book on the number of psychics who died from a backlash. This was especially true in the current era, where extraordinary powers were manifested. The levels and realms were clearly differentiated. Even though the ruler had its advantages and the CUN had its disadvantages, true experts had their internal logic and external environment integrated into one. They were natural sources of radiation. If one forcefully peeped into them, one would have to be prepared to die from the radiation. And it was very normal for the results of psychic communication to be distorted and interfered with when facing such targets. There were cases of people vomiting 3 liters of blood and receiving the wrong answer. There were even cases of people dying from anger. Whether it was Gong Qi or Luo Yuan, they were the strongest people in the world. No matter how low-key they were, the influence of their radiation covered the entire world. Especially Gong Qi. He was a powerful figure in the ability user society. His influence was even more astonishing. It was no surprise that he and Luo Yuan had intersected or that there was some unclear relationship of interest between them. Therefore, Luo Nan wouldn't come to a conclusion easily. The results of psychic communication needed to be verified. Plus, he wasn't directly probing the two dangerous targets. When using the psychic diagram, Luo Nan had intentionally overstepped the iron law of avoiding extraordinaries when using the psychic technique. He had taken the initiative to touch the domain of extraordinaries. But he did his utmost to avoid meeting force with force. He tried to use more skillful methods. He made more thorough preparations. He chose a more suitable and ingenious angle. He also found the most comfortable and smoothest starting position. Snake Tongue and Fan Lu. Neither of these two were extraordinaries, but one was Gong Qi's spirit behind his back. The other was Luo Yuan's driver. They formed a close and direct connection with the two extraordinaries, but it was also a blind spot in a certain sense. It looked like a trick, but it was actually the optimal solution obtained by combining all kinds of intelligence and information. Right now, Luo Nan had 2 different methods of dealing with Snake Tongue and Fan Lu. He used a method of close contact with Snake Tongue. However, he didn't have any hope that she could keep this secret. All he wanted was a channel of information that could influence Gong Qi's judgment. However, the current situation was so smooth that he was a little surprised. Let's leave it at that for now. As for Fan Lu, Luo Yuan's chauffeur, he was a perfect entry point. He had been following Luo Yuan for more than 10 years and was definitely a trusted aide. Even if his aptitude was mediocre and he was unwilling to undergo genetic modification, his status was neither high nor low. However, his understanding of Luo Yuan was far greater than anyone else's. Luo Nan dug up a lot of interesting information from Luo Nan's dream. And this was under circumstances where Luo Nan had clearly taken some mental defensive measures. Moreover, although Luo Nan used the psychic diagram as an effective method of gathering and analyzing intelligence, he wouldn't wholeheartedly rely on this method to conquer the world. Once the psychic map had a clear direction and center of gravity, the entire world's mental sensing network would be put to good use. Luo Yuan's senses were far too sharp. Luo Nan couldn't follow him all the time to avoid attracting attention. But Luo Nan didn't need to worry about anything here on Fan Road. Luo Nan temporarily set aside his cultivation. Aside from the news related to the auction, he also received more concrete feedback on the actual scene. Right now it was early morning in Ban City. Inland, whose city was roughly 2 time zones away. Right now it was midnight. Fan Lu, the target he was paying attention to, had already been waiting quietly at Hu City's airport for 3 hours. Finally, the transport plane from the wilderness had arrived. Fan Lu was involved in a large transaction and it was a crucial link in the treat plan. Fan Lu personally handled all the procedures of receiving, inspecting, transferring, and so on. From the moment the transport plane arrived, Fan Lu and his attendant Little Zhao didn't have a moment of leisure. Separate the equipment and data. Are the appraisers from the Toyama auction house here yet? The transfer vehicle is waiting over there. Our people don't get involved. Let the people from the Toyama auction house handle it. This matter has nothing to do with us from the moment the equipment leaves the transport plane. Everything was busy but not messy. While the appraisers from Toyama were nervously inspecting the equipment and data, Fan Lu had already finished his work. He let out a long sigh and even had the leisure to lament. I haven't seen these familiar old objects in 20 years. Speaking of which, I actually didn't notice them at all when they were placed in that place. Little Zhao went, but before he could respond he was rudely pushed to the side. Fan Lu turned his head in horror, but he saw a fellow with a deformed head suddenly jump out. The fellow's long and narrow eyes stared straight at him. Contact the next transport plane for me. I'll go with it. What? Fan Lu didn't understand for a moment. He was even more baffled as to why this fellow, the horned demon, suddenly followed him. Speaking of which, although the transaction with the Toyama auction house was done under the name of the horned demon, it actually had nothing to do with him. The airport wouldn't even notify him of the transfer, but this fellow, the horned demon, gave a rare explanation. I suddenly had some inspiration in that laboratory. I want to go there to verify it. I'll take the next transport plane there. Fan Lu felt his scalp hurt. It's not like you haven't been to that place before. It is not big and now half of it has collapsed. If such a big transport plane goes there, it will definitely be empty. How can there be another one? Then arrange one for me. Hiss, you know the environment over there, right? I don't need to emphasize how unstable it is. This transport plane is originally rushing for time. They are waiting at the last moment. Now even if I arrange one for you, there is a high probability that it will be transferred again. You won't be able to find the entrance even if you go there. Why bother? You idiot, why do you care about me? I was the one who found the entrance. Fan Lu's good intentions were trampled into the mud by the horned demon. No matter how good-tempered he was, he couldn't help but explode. You found it? Ha, as early as 20 years ago we were there. I was also the one who found it 20 years later. Hee, that place has always been under Wu Jun's control. You snatched it. That was also found by me. Fan Lu finally realized that he had nothing to say to a madman, so he could only use the delaying tactic. I have to inform Mr. Luo Yuan first. As Fan Lu said, he turned around to leave, but his neck was clasped by the fingers of the horned demon when his body only turned halfway, and he was forcibly pulled back. As the force penetrated, the blood vessels, nerves and bones in his throat were squeezed and twisted. His vision turned black and he almost fainted. What are you doing? Xiao Zhao was shocked. He wanted to come over to save him, but he was kicked by the horned demon and flew 10 steps away. He fainted directly. This time, the appraisal and transfer work on the transport plane was suddenly interrupted. Several appraisers from the Toyama auction house not far away were stunned. The security personnel they brought raised the firearms in their hands and aimed at the horned demon who had already lifted the person halfway. The atmosphere was so tense that it could collapse at any time. Damn. Fan Lu knew that the horned demon was a dog. He would turn his face at any time, but he didn't expect the most ruthless bite to bite him directly. His vision turned with difficulty trying to save himself. The security of the Toyama auction house couldn't be counted on, but at this time he was on the transport plane. Some of the passengers here were the products of the gene exchange. Damn it, with his current state, unless Luo Yuan's attention was on him, there was no chance at all. The horned demon completely ignored the outside environment and the changes in the atmosphere. He only put his deformed and distorted face in front of Fan Lu. Don't you understand? I found it and I should have special rights there. Fan Lu's brain was already hypoxic. He slapped the horned demon's arm hard, but the latter just talked to himself. These days I have a lot of inspiration, especially when I am dreaming. I can feel some kind of wonderful guidance from those flying fragments. They may combine into the most wonderful answer at any time. Do you understand that feeling? Oh, I forgot that you can't speak. The horned demon finally let go and Fan Lu fell directly to the ground. His whole body was soft and he only knew how to cough and retch. The horned demon didn't mind squatting beside him and patted his shoulder and back. I know you are very busy doing odd jobs. It is very difficult for you to understand this kind of mysterious state, so you don't need to waste any more effort. I make a request and you just need to agree. Everyone can relax. Fan Lu repeatedly chopped the horned demon 100 times, 1,000 times in his heart, but he still had to act nice on the outside. He made his final persuasion with a hoarse voice. You can wait a little longer. In a month, no, in half a month you will have a lot of time to research. With that baby who is still drinking milk? I'm saying that you don't need to try your luck and find the door. The horned demon's finger pressed onto Fan Lu's neck. I say, little Fan. Even though we have been kindred spirits quite a few times, you still don't understand. Luck is my attribute. You don't need to worry about such a boring thing. Give me a definite answer. Do you agree or not? Fan Lu coughed a few more times. He wanted to speak again, but his head had already been forcefully snapped down by the horned demon's monstrous strength. He nodded twice. The horned demon's voice came over. Excellent. Happy cooperation. Thousands of kilometers away, Luo Nan began to chuckle. Yin Lu, who was right next to him massaging his shoulders, felt strange. She leaned back slightly. Mister? The soft sensation on Luo Nan's shoulders and even the side of his cheeks left. His mind instantly became empty, but it was soon filled with more important matters. You said that you had spare materials for the transmission array you built last time. Yes. Chapter 748. The medium-sized transport plane flew through the night, advancing all the way inland, but in the end, it still couldn't outrun the sun that rose from the horizon. The transport plane that flew all the way from Huqing finally arrived at the relevant airspace when the first light of dawn silently spread over thousands of miles of wasteland. From beginning to end, the cabin of the transport plane was empty. Everyone was in the cockpit. Of course, there were only 3 people on the entire plane: the pilot, co-pilot, and the centaur. As a bad customer who forced his way onto the plane, the centaur was self-aware and clearly showed his distrust of the 2 crew members. He was nailed in the cockpit until the transport plane arrived at the destination he hoped for. What was strange was that the cabin was empty along the way and the cockpit was quiet. The centaur, who always had the talkative attribute, actually kept his mouth shut. If one didn't look back, one wouldn't be able to feel his existence. If silence could be accumulated, the transport plane would have crashed halfway due to severe overload. After finally reaching the target airspace, the centaur finally said, "Descend." The transport plane penetrated the clouds and continued to descend. Looking out from the porthole, the slightly undulating red soil of the wasteland below was already the kind that the centaur was familiar with. He looked at the instrument panel on the transport plane and converted the angle of the sun. The centaur was finally satisfied and patted the shoulders of the 2 pilots. Very good, maintain this height. We will hover for a while. Pay attention to the mutants. It shouldn't be a problem for you. As the centaur said, at an altitude of about 6,000 to 7,000 meters, the population and number of flying mutants couldn't be underestimated. Hovering around was not a good choice. However, neither the pilot nor the co-pilot spoke. They just followed the centaur's instructions and began to hover at high altitude. They skillfully avoided several waves of flying mutants that passed by. This continued for about 20 minutes before the centaur finally stopped. Very good, very agile. The pilot and co-pilot remained silent. As the products of the gene exchange, they were the most capable subordinates and executors. The centaur's praise was completely wrong. Of course, the centaur didn't care. After saying that, he left the cockpit and walked into the rear cabin. At the same time, he gestured for the cabin door to be opened. I won't trouble you with the landing. Let's have a pleasant cooperation. See you next time. As the hatch opened, the cold and strong airflow from the high altitude went straight in. The centaur faced the whistling wind, closed his eyes, opened his arms and jumped down without hesitation. Only his sharp whistle was left in the cabin. In the cockpit, a radar alarm sounded. The co-pilot could clearly see through the monitor screen that almost at the moment when the centaur jumped off the transport plane, a huge shadow swept past the bottom of the fuselage and converged with the centaur's figure. Then it dived at high speed. The pilot and co-pilot looked at each other. Without saying anything, they flew the plane back. The centaur, who made a leap of faith from the transport plane, stood steadily on the back of a pterosaur. This high-altitude mutant, known for its ferocity, was uncomfortable with the sudden weight on its body, but it only slightly twisted its long neck and maintained a relatively stable posture. Then it spiraled down. After just 3 minutes, the centaur truly set foot on the sun-covered wasteland, and the pterosaur, which was a temporary vehicle, flew back into the sky and disappeared in a blink of an eye. Deterred by the huge size of this high-altitude predator, dust and smoke rose from all directions in the wilderness. Some of the small animals that were swimming around in the surroundings fled in all directions. Some of them lost their normal rhythm and quickly became the breakfast of the strong. The food chain of survival of the fittest was simple and straightforward. It didn't require any brains at all, and it was most favored by the centaur. He looked around and glanced at this wilderness full of wildness and vitality. Of course, it was full of cruelty. He grinned and stood there with his arms crossed, waiting quietly. In just a few minutes, the pterosaur just now returned. From its broad shoulders, 3 figures jumped down one after another. One of them just landed on the ground, and he took the opportunity to punch directly into the rippling red ground. Half of his arm was deeply stuck in the ground. He then raised his hand, and his fingers had already pierced between the head and neck of a giant viper that was as thick as a human thigh. Red and green body fluids mixed together, flowing on the snake that had been caught but was still twitching violently. Then the snake was thrown everywhere. Amidst the protests of the others, the snake catcher didn't say a word. He stuffed the fat viper together with his own arm into the long mouth of the pterosaur that landed next to him. The sharp teeth of the sharp-beaked pterodactyl habitually scraped the food, instantly turning the venomous snake into strips of meat. When the tip of the teeth scratched the snake catcher's arm, which was even thicker, it did not leave the slightest mark. After feeding, the snake catcher slapped the pterosaur's head, almost causing this top meat-eater that looked like the reincarnation of a dinosaur to fall down. So the pterosaur soon flapped its wings and flew into the air again. In the blink of an eye, it flew high and disappeared. It felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from the completion of the mission, but it also felt as if it had fled far away. The snake catcher was undoubtedly the strongest among the group. The centaur probably only reached a position slightly below his chest. When the sharp-beaked Quetzalcoatlus was used as a vehicle, it probably put most of its strength on this person. It was only natural that it ate the food he fed. The centaur was quite afraid of this giant. It kept staring at him, and after confirming that the giant didn't say anything else after feeding, it turned its gaze to the other two. Apart from the giant, there was also a middle-aged man who was as thin as a monkey. As soon as he landed, he squatted by the side and fanned himself. His curled-up body felt like it was too small to fit on the giant's shoulder. His actions were extremely jumpy, which was really unworthy of his face that had been through the vicissitudes of life. He stuck out his tongue and shouted, "Hot, hot, hot." His face was red as if he had a heat stroke or taken drugs. The centaur was more familiar with this person, so he took the initiative to greet. "Monkey, how many did you drink today?" Monkey spat, 10 little blue balls. "I was brought over by Fatty Dragon before I could get it. I can turn the earth upside down now." As he spoke, he glanced at the giant who created the shadow on the side, but he didn't continue. As for the last one, even in the wilderness he was still wearing a suit as if he had just walked out of a business banquet. A bow tie, a watch, and a pair of shiny leather shoes. Everything about him made him look like a well-dressed person. At this time, the fastidious person looked down at his watch and frowned. "We are about 20 minutes later than the scheduled time. There's no time to chat now. Remember, we are here to receive the secret auction results. It has nothing to do with the centaur. That's why, you stubborn fatty dragon, you should have listened to me just now and released the germs separately. That way, everyone wouldn't have to trudge around on foot. You should know that every minute in the wilderness, the amount of viruses and germs we inhale is more than 200 times that of a big city. And this damn soil." With that said, the fastidious person turned around to leave, but before he could take a step, his shoulder was hooked by the centaur. The two men's faces were almost stuck together. The latter didn't care how disgusted the fastidious person looked and whispered in his ear, "I heard that your good friend Brain Demon died. It doesn't matter if he died, but where is Wu Jun or a family that can threaten me? This is your plan, right, flour sausage? Call Jingxin." Fastidious person, Jingxin pushed the centaur away in annoyance. He even used his fingers to wipe off the dust on his shoulder. "There are always accidents in everything. We have been trying our best to find her these few days. We even caught 2 of the upper echelons of the small parish for questioning, but Wu Jun seems to have disappeared." "Then what about her child?" "Brain Demon did it personally, but I heard that he didn't even leave a complete corpse. This is an accident among accidents. We still don't know what kind of powerful enemy centaur encountered. We can only determine from the traces of the Fusong tree that this is a very powerful psychic. Even after Brain Demon used the Fusong tree system to exert his strength, he still crushed him to death like a bug. It's very likely to be a transcendent. If it's a hidden trump card of the Xianxia parish, it will definitely be a very terrifying matter. I don't care who killed the Brain Demon or how he died. I only care about where Wu Jun and her child that you promised me are. That child should have left the Yuhole market. You have to know that the surrounding environment is too complicated, so we haven't found him yet. Alright, don't be angry. I admit that the conditions I promised you were greatly discounted. The parish will make up for the difference. Jingxin revealed a perfect and sincere smile. You cannot trust me, but there's still Ma Ho Fatty Dragon and the Amaterasu parish. After so many years we should have established mutual trust, right? Centaur stared at Jingxin without even blinking. Jingxin straightened his face and put on a more habitual serious expression. What the four of us need to do now is to squeeze out the value of that laboratory before the inexplicable treat plan is activated. This is a bet on the reputation of you, me, and the parish. We have also opened up a connection with the true upper echelons. The dark network auction went very smoothly. We just need to get the rest of the money now. Centaur chuckled. Now that the equipment and information have been dismantled and taken away, without Wu Jun, even if we can enter the door, there's no way to find the truly valuable things from those fragments. As long as she enters, it's victory. Centaur, my dear friend, you have to understand that Luo Yuandao's laboratory is just the entrance to a huge maze. I believe that in his years of research, there are indeed some techniques that can capture valuable fragments in the equipment he taught Wu Jun, but that is only a limited method to increase the probability. In essence, they are still trying their luck. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the power to protect themselves after 20 years. Jingxin was trying his best to brainwash Centaur with his glib tongue. Fat Dragon suddenly crossed his arms, signaling for the dangerous topic to stop for the time being. At the same time, he said in a deep voice. Chapter 749. 3,500 kilometers away from some inland wasteland, Ban City's time zone was pushed forward by 3 hours. When the first glimmer of dawn appeared over the wasteland, the sun was already high in the sky over Ban City. Today was Monday, the first working day after the weekend. Due to the barbell structure of the city, which was short from north to south and long from east to west, the many layers of traffic in the east and west of Ban City sunk into a busy and congested predicament. Temporary drainage channels were opened on North Mountain Lake. The military and police were mobilized on a large scale to suppress the mutant population on the lake, allowing for flying cars to shuttle through. The humming sound of engines resonated through the horizon. The tranquil and leisurely scenery of last night was nowhere to be seen. During this busy time, the 2 passengers on the yacht drifting on North Mountain Lake entered a working state. The sunlit area on the top deck was supposed to be a leisure area, but it had now become a temporary work area. Whether it was Luo Nan or Yin Lu, they were both immersed in writing and data. They were extremely busy. Luo Nan had been writing and drawing from the moment he entered this state. His brush moved like it was flying. He sketched one character after another and handed them over to Yin Lu for intelligence gathering and analysis. Actually, the technology of telepathic transcription had long since matured in this era. Luo Nan could completely use the relevant technology to reproduce the images of his mental clairvoyance into electronic information and search it directly. No matter how lifelike the sketches were, they were still separated by a layer. This kind of method affected Yin Li's efficiency quite a bit. It made her do a lot of extra work. However, the secretary had to accept the willful choice of the boss. Yin Li didn't have any thoughts of complaint in her heart. After all, this was a real-time image from several thousand kilometers away. Even though Yin Lu knew that Luo Nan possessed the ability to mentally travel 10,000 kilometers, it was still hard for her mind to not be shaken when she truly experienced it from a different angle. It was still the same saying. Omnipresent. It was practically omniscient. It was omnipotent. Plus, Yin Lu knew that Luo Nan's sketching technique was related to his clairvoyance and analysis of his targets. It contained deeper details. Therefore, she didn't feel the slightest bit of pain. She just earnestly sorted out the images Luo Nan drew and organized them. At the same time, she mobilized the Blood Flame Order's accumulated database over the years to distinguish, analyze, and determine the nature of these characters. She promptly reported them. The one in the jeep, Kevin? Gardner, a self-proclaimed ranger with a B-rank fleshly body. Aside from close combat, he was proficient in all sorts of military equipment, including all sorts of exoskeleton armors. It wouldn't be surprising if he could drive the Deep Blue Walker. We always suspected that he had a military background, but even when we were at our best with the military, we couldn't find any concrete evidence. The person controlling the glider to descend is nicknamed Hua Dian. He's a very famous spirit energy detective in the industry, and he can basically be confirmed to be a spirit medium. Usually he would only take money, but this time, his motive was quite suspicious. This barefoot ascetic priest should be Anthony. Although he did not appear in the mainstream circles of the inner plane, he had always taken it upon himself to spread the gospel. His prestige in the world of religions was high, and some parishes even hoped to confer him the title of saint, making him the main guardian saint of the extraordinary domain. It was said that he had been searching for the holy relic, hoping to find the traces of holiness in the changes of the new era. There are many believers of traditional religions who hold this belief and have even formed a secret organization. Anthony is likely to be one of them. Yin Lu felt more and more baffled after finding the information of the three participants. The backgrounds of these three people are quite complicated. Aren't the horned demons looking for trouble by asking them to come? They're not complicated and they can't. They don't have the guts to participate in the dark network auction of the horned demons. Luo Nan responded without thinking. His mental sensing network continued to capture the target and focus. He didn't just give the target a quick sketch during this process. Instead, he started from various angles, referring to the information Yin Lu provided and even starting from the feeling of a split second. He sought to capture the fundamental characteristics of the target. Not only did this fill the living starry sky with material, but it also served as preparation for the future drawing of the psychic diagram. They weren't the only ones. Although they had different standpoints and positions, the horned demons were doing similar work 3,000 kilometers away. They relied on Fatty Dragon's special ability to control the surrounding mutants. This ability appeared to be quite common. Luo Nan had personally witnessed the deaths of two ability users of this type. Puppeteer had died to the Devil Ray's bite, and Brain Demon had died even more miserably. They were all like this. Even Luo Nan himself had this type of ability in a certain sense. However, Fatty Dragon, this big guy, appeared to be much calmer than the other two who had died. His consciousness seemed to be able to jump back and forth between multiple mutants at any time. It was a bit like when Luo Nan's soul was in an out-of-body state. Mr. Bai had once misinterpreted it as the attached soul state. He could switch back and forth quite freely, seeming to be able to jump back and forth within a radius of 100 kilometers. Even with the restriction of needing a life vessel, Fatty Dragon's monitoring range was the widest that Luo Nan had ever seen, aside from himself and a few other mental extraordinaries. Anyone would think that Fatty Dragon was of the fleshly side just by looking at his build, but his attainments in the mental side were quite deep. Luo Nan took the information provided by Yin Lu and sized it up seriously. Yin Lu explained in a soft voice to the side, providing some unclear details of the information. Fatty Dragon is the backbone of the Amaterasu order. He is also one of the high-end thugs. He was mentally retarded in his early years, but the true god of the Amaterasu order personally enlightened him and unlocked his innate talent. Since then he has been out of control. In a short 6 or 7 years he has already stably occupied the top 200 of the various inner world rankings, and he is still rising. In terms of combat strength alone, some people call him the Eye of Truth, Fairchild of the Order of Justice, and the Secret Wheel of Life, Master Fan of the Eye of Secret Contract. They are known as the three heroes of the Secret Order. And these three seem to be drifting away from the core decision-making circle for various reasons. In any case, Fatty Dragon's existence has clearly raised the level of this transaction. Luo Nan nodded. So this person needs to maintain a distance from the horned demon. Otherwise, the other participants will certainly have misgivings. Yin Lu also agreed with this judgment. She then said, as for the other two, Monkey Horse was born in the wilderness. He is lecherous and bloodthirsty. He is a notorious savage among the vagabonds. He is also a frequent guest on the official wanted list. I don't know when he joined the Amaterasu order. This time he probably needs to conceal his identity and give others a surprise attack. As for that Jingxin, it's quite strange for him to have a relationship with the Amaterasu order. His official identity is a wilderness ecology expert at Hood's Wilderness Laboratory. At the same time, he is also a member of the Ability User Society. He also has a professional technical position at headquarters. I'm afraid that Abner's expression won't look too good when this news gets out. Abner was the president of the Ability User Society headquarters. He was nominally the representative and leader of the entire world's ability users. Luo Nan had already seen him a few times from afar through the mental sensing network. He could more or less imagine what that person's expression would look like when he said that. He grinned and then furrowed his brows. The Amaterasu Order has pulled out many hidden strings. They are completely determined to win this transaction. If they have this kind of determination, they can just take out the money to bid for the bid. They can also directly cooperate with the Dark Hand behind the scenes. With the horned demon in the middle, they should know each other's background. Yin Lu was unable to answer this question. Luo Nan didn't expect to obtain an answer. He quickly raised another question. How can anyone get involved in the Amaterasu Order? Let's not talk about the horned demon. Fatty Dragon's background is simple, but Jingxin is a member of the society with a high position. Brain Demon and Horse Monkey are vagrants of the wilderness. The doctrine of education without discrimination, Tianqi True Soul, is just a random patchwork. There's nothing special about it. Snake Tongue's myriad spirit order can be modified and used without a single flaw. Luo Nan had more or less experienced the atmosphere of the Amaterasu Order's headquarters these past few days in Ban City. The management was really quite loose. Large and small overground and underground orders were allowed to grow in Ban City, the core region of the order. For example, Zhou Wei, a mutant that clearly possessed basic intelligence and had already become the core of a small order, lived next to the residential area and allowed them to do as they pleased. It looked quite impressive, but in Spring City, they had to obtain the holy cloak of the Xia Luo order as soon as possible. They didn't even hesitate to dig up the foundation of the order. Luo Nan still wasn't clear on what kind of logic they followed. Because Luo Nan was racking his brains for the Amaterasu Order, the members of the Amaterasu Order fell into a rather headache-inducing situation as more and more people appeared to participate in the transaction. Aside from Anthony, Huadian and Gardner, there were other people approaching from different directions and distances. With so many people, it was hard to avoid some bumping and bumping. Faster Xikemi. Black Mist. That bastard who likes to put curses on people. Back in the wilderness, that fellow tormented me until I peed my pants. The horse monkey was thick-skinned. He spoke of his family's embarrassing past like a fart, but the hatred in his words caused the vast sunny wasteland to seem a bit gloomy. He appeared in a spiritual body state. Jingxin grasped the main point. This fellow is clearly overconfident. You must know that there are 10 people participating in the transaction, including us, right? The horned demon nodded in confirmation. Jingxin continued, most of the 10 people should be on the mental side. They are scheming against the unsuspecting. All of them have the ability to deal with him. It's all too easy for a monkey to take revenge. Jingxin consciously assumed the position of the brains of this four-man group. He pacified Horse Monkey and reminded his companions of a more critical issue. Pay attention to the motorcycle rider that's following Gardner. I can't see his face clearly right now, but I remember the dagger behind his waist. Cui Qinghe, a swordsman from G City. He's proficient in close combat assassination. However, he has another identity. He's an Ablatum Knight. Li Taixing, the Secret Covenant First Ablatum of the Order of Justice, came to Chan City to negotiate. This person was one of the attendants. Before the horned demon and the others could digest this, they heard another question. Who is this person? The one who spoke was Fatty Dragon. He rarely asked a question. At the same time, he used a secret technique to share the image he sensed with his companions. This backpacker. Is he part of the transaction? At nearly the same time, Luo Nan, who was over 3,000 kilometers away, locked onto the last person. The instant the focus was completed, Luo Nan's pen tip froze. Chapter 750. The constantly approaching traders made it necessary for Horned Demon and his group to disperse as soon as possible to avoid being caught plotting behind the scenes. Because of this, every problem had to be resolved in a race against time. Jingxin, who assumed the position of think tank, felt that the search efficiency of the Order's database was terrible. 40 to 50 words popped out from the gaps of his teeth before the corresponding information appeared. Wan Ta, the director of the Orchid Town Welfare House in the Forestwall district of Xia City. The founder of the Order of Creation. Currently, the Order has 27 members and 2 suspected ability users. What the hell? Fortunately, the follow-up information was somewhat valuable. He has a good relationship with Luo Nan. Xia Junping, an official member of the Order of Creation, is Luo Nan's best friend. They communicate frequently. Jingxin raised his head and cast a horrified look at Horned Demon. You actually let this kind of person participate in the auction and even let him pay a deposit. Are you sure that this Dean Wan doesn't have Luo Nan, Ouyang Chen, Wu Jiong or all of them behind him? Horned Demon was also horrified. Are you kidding me? I didn't allow the IP of Xia City to join at all. This Dean Welfare House must have used some sort of method. Horse Monkey had a big heart. He even comforted the two. Xia City isn't a monolithic block. The information that flows out from there every year is worth at least $1 billion. Who knows how many so-called insiders have gotten rich? Look, isn't Horned Demon the living proof? Horned Demon and Jingxin ignored him. Jingxin asked Fatty Dragon, "Are you sure there's no one hiding behind this guy?" Fatty Dragon said in a muffled voice, "He himself is very troublesome. He has already sensed the surveillance carrier." The gazes of the few people intersected before finally focusing on Horned Demon. Horned Demon was silent for about 3 seconds before he burst out laughing. If Luo Nan was called over ahead of time, many people would have very interesting expressions. But from my point of view, that kid would rather kill his way over than let an inexplicable person come over to scout the situation. Xia City has a lot of plastic brotherhood. Don't rush to a conclusion. The current situation is very complicated. It's much more complicated than we imagined. Jingxin went through the information of the participants again. The more he thought about it, the deeper the waters were. However, it was impossible to turn back now. Otherwise, evacuation would be a big problem. There's not enough time. Let's disperse first. Fatty Dragon set up the communication network. Everyone can contact each other at any time. First, do the work on the surface. Then we can sort out the rest step by step. This was the safest way and it was also the last resort. Other than the Centaur, the 3 members of the Amaterasu sect covered their tracks. With the support of Fatty Dragon's huge sensing range of nearly 100 kilometers, they staggered from the direction of the people coming from each direction. The Centaur stayed in the same place. He first pondered, then he squatted down and grabbed a handful of red soil from the ground. There was still the body fluid of the snake that was killed by Fat Dragon. He stuck out his tongue and used the tip of his tongue to roll up the mixture of soil and viper gravy. He tasted it carefully and swallowed it. An ominous fishy smell. Malice is approaching. The Centaur's mood became a little anxious. He stood up and walked around the hole made by the fist on the ground several times. As a psychic, he tried to pinpoint the source of the malice, but his spiritual compass seemed to have been blown away by a strong wind. It was inaccurate. For such a situation to occur, it was either that the other party's strength was far above his, or that there was more than one source of malicious intent, or both. Either way, it was far from what he had expected. The Centaur stretched out his hand, and the limbs in his vision were trembling slightly. "We're all in place. We're turning back." Jingxin reported the latest situation on behalf of Fatty Dragon, who was not good with words. "The light spots on the glider should be able to capture your position. Gardner, who is in front, will arrive in about 15 minutes. The black fog is also trying to sense from afar. Are you ready?" The Centaur was still looking at his arm. After a few seconds he grinned. "It doesn't feel good. However, when I think about how they have to search for the laboratory door from scratch, I feel a lot better." Jingxin ignored the crazy words that followed and voiced his opinion. "I don't feel good either. Apart from us, half of the remaining 6 people had powerful backgrounds or were suspects. This looked more like the inspection of the goods before the auction. Before you exposed your information, the real seller would have already sold the entire process to the last detail. Centaur, my old friend, you might be dancing in the palm of someone else's hand. I hope you don't drag us into it." Faster thief. No matter what, it was impossible for the Centaur to back down now. Just as he was speaking, the people participating in the transaction were arriving one after another. He had already seen the dust stirred up by Gardner's off-road vehicle and the trajectory of the light spots glider hovering in the air. In other directions that he could not see, layers of complex thoughts were surging up. Just as he predicted with his psychic connection, there was a serious lack of goodwill. About half an hour later, all the participants in the transaction had arrived at the location where the centaur was. Different people, the same scrutiny, and the natural resistance and pressure in the unfamiliar environment and atmosphere of suspicion caused everyone to naturally distance themselves. They were scattered in an area with a diameter of nearly 100 meters, only surrounding the centaur in the middle. The 3 people from the Amaterasu cult showed no flaws. They were scattered in different directions, intertwining with the other 6 people. Those who knew each other, like Jing Xin and Cui Qinghe, nodded to each other. Those who hated each other, like Ma Hou, looked ferociously at the black mist as if he wanted to devour it. This was not a disguise but a performance of his true colors. But in the end, all the focus was on the centaur's head, which made the deformed skull in front of his forehead ache. The pressure was huge. But the more it was like this, the more excited the centaur became. In this state, the centaur's craziness was finally completely stimulated. Under his feet was the red earth wasteland covered with wrinkles, but it felt like he was standing on the glorious stage of an opera house. He didn't deliberately face anyone. Instead, he chose to turn his back to the sun, allowing the rising sun to gild his body. Then he began his speech. "Everyone, it's a pleasure to meet you here. Logically speaking, I should have given a passionate speech, but based on the foundation of our relationship, there was basically no need for that. As I have written in advance in the instructions for the secret visit auction, this is a transaction of one is willing to take the hit, and the other is willing to take the hit. In this transaction I may be a shameless robber, but I may also be an idiot who buys the casket and returns the pearls. You may spend a huge sum of money to pay the deposit, but you may also find a treasure that will make people envious. At the end of the day, this is a transaction full of gambling. It is an exciting and unhealthy relationship. So, I must say the ugly words first. I must confirm again that you all already understand the background of this transaction." At this time, Gardner, who was wearing a leather coat and sitting on the hood of the off-road vehicle, raised his hand like a good student, indicating that he had something to say. The centaur gestured for him to speak. Gardner's skin was a weather-polished dark red and he wore sunglasses. His whole body was dark under the sun, but when he grinned, his teeth were white and very eye-catching. And his words seemed to be even more attractive. "The background you are talking about, are you referring to the lucky incident of being a flag-waving minion, but accidentally signing the final large auction commission agreement?" As soon as he said that, sparse laughter came from all directions. Some were serious and some were not amused, and the people who laughed included Jing Xin and Horse Monkey. What F*** King good acting skills. The centaur's cheeks twitched twice, and his eyes slid across Gardner's face like a venomous snake. The latter still maintained a bright smile, not caring at all. It was also at this moment that on the Amaterasu Parish's secret communication network, Jing Xin once again announced that his judgment was correct. "Look, this is basically an inspection team. Perhaps behind these people are the buyers who were prepared to pay in that damned auction." After mocking the centaur impudently, Horse Monkey locked onto his enemy again and chuckled. "I don't know about the others, but that guy from Black Fog, unless he transforms into the world's top actor in his spirit body state, I dare to swear that this guy's gambling addiction must have flared up, and he just barged in. He doesn't know the twists and turns inside, so now he's stupid, and the frequency at which he detects others at the mental level has increased several times." "Is this good news?" Jing Xin reluctantly responded out of friendship. "Of course it's good news. I think he's now a little girl who's been stuffed into a men's prison. What a perfect test subject. We have to keep him, don't scare him away." The centaur didn't comment on this. He had his own thoughts and rhythm of speech. Therefore he could endure the ridicule around him and maintain a basic commercial face. It's good that everyone understands the background and has expectations. Can save me a lot of saliva. But according to the most basic professional ethics, no matter what kind of cognitive standpoint you have, I still have to emphasize the essence of this transaction. The opportunity one provide you is just to taste the so-called fresh flavor, before the real carnival of capital. And your bid won't get real goods and services. What you get is only an opportunity, and it's an illusory opportunity. Maybe you're lucky enough to reach the sky in a single bound. Maybe you're unlucky enough to have the corpses dealt with later. At this moment someone spoke again, but his voice was a little strange. Because it was Black Fog who spoke. As the only participant who came with a spirit body, he was like his name, like a dark cloud that had sunk to the ground. At this moment he was using his mind to interfere with the material level, vibrating the air molecules to form a voice. You don't have to be so secretive. I just want to ask, as long as you pay the balance, can you enter Luo Yuandao's wilderness laboratory to explore and search? The information and items found inside can also be taken away at will? Before he finished speaking, Black Fog's heart sank. Because at this moment more than a dozen gazes shifted over at the same time, and there was a subtle change. Black Fog was a senior B-level powerhouse after all, so he didn't lack experience and scheming. From his point of view, the changes in the gazes of the people around him, even if there were some differences in the details, were similar in essence. There was no need to be precise. Just working together itself was tantamount to excluding him, and it also confirmed the guess in his heart. He had stumbled into a deadly vortex. Mata was annoyed. It was also his fault for getting carried away by the recent abnormally popular formatting theory, cage theory, and configuration theory. When he heard that it was the possible origin of these theories, he excitedly paid the deposit, thinking that it was a gamble to cut the queue, but he forgot to refer to similar incidents, which were all earth-shattering. This was not a place for a small investor like him to mix in. Not to mention he had encountered a troublesome old enemy like Ma Hou. Bad luck. Bad luck. Bad luck. Black Fog already had the intention to retreat. At this moment the horned demon also responded lazily. I've said it before, it's just an opportunity. In fact, your luck wasn't too good at the beginning. There was a small problem with the extra benefits I prepared for you, so I had to cancel it. This also caused us to have to put in more effort to enter and exit Luo Yuandao's laboratory. Black Fog couldn't go around with the horned demon anymore, but he couldn't step too deep either. He could only act appropriately and pretend to be anxious, speak human language, whereas Luo Yuandao's laboratory. The horned demon's expression didn't change. It's right where I'm standing, within a radius of 300 kilometers. Black Fog didn't even need to pretend. His spirit body was greatly shaken, and the sound wave formed by interference was like a loudspeaker buzzing. You tricked us. With a radius of 300 kilometers, this is the area of a large metropolitan area. You want to play hide-and-seek here until the end of time? I've said it before, one is willing to take the hit and the other is willing to take the hit. Damn it, you're going to scare this coward away. Ma Hou scratched his ears and cheeks as he watched from the side. He couldn't help but forcefully correct the horned demon's words through the internal communication network. Jingxin persuaded Ma Hou to maintain restraint. Black Fog has long wanted to run. It's useless to be tactful. Besides, it doesn't matter if he runs away. You can chase him back. If you feel that your strength isn't enough, I think Fat Dragon will be happy to help without affecting the mission. He has always had an appetite for this kind of spirit body. Fat Dragon didn't respond. As for the horned demon, he seemed to be looking back. He raised 3 fingers and made an oath. I can swear with the spiritual perception of a psychic that Luo Yuandao's laboratory is indeed in this area. However, it is affected by a special force and drifts erratically. However, it is definitely traceable. Otherwise, it would be impossible for it to go to the auction. I will inform you of this news and join the search team. If it is found, I will share it with everyone for free. Having said that, he chuckled again. Actually, after finding it, it can't be hidden. At present, the laboratory's anchoring device has been dismantled and transported. If you want to open the gap, the collision of space-time and the interaction between the mental and material levels will be very spectacular. You should be worried that the Toyama auction house will come back for trouble instead of wasting precious time and doubting my information. The horned demon's solemn vow still showed a certain degree of persuasiveness. However, no matter what he said, Black Fog would never stay here. At this moment, the horned demon's pointed words also came over. Anyone can leave at any time, no problem. However, as stated in the event description, the balance is not collected and the deposit is not refunded. Diagonally opposite, the psionic detective Hua Dian, who had been silent since he arrived, also raised his hand, indicating that he had a question to consult. F*CK the deposit, F*CK the F*CK opportunity. Black Fog directly retreated and the horned demon answered the question. This was the best opportunity to leave. Didn't Ma Hou, that son of a bitch, stared at him with venomous eyes? His decision was obviously correct. Just as he retreated, Ma Ho's figure in the distance jumped as if he was about to chase, but he forcefully stopped with an unwilling expression. Such a reaction made Black Fog's heart turn cold. This son of a bitch has an accomplice. Otherwise, with that temper, how could he hold back his fierceness? Without time to rejoice, Black Fog used the advantage of the spirit body's high-speed flight and retreated with all his strength. In a short time he escaped hundreds of kilometers away. This should be a safe distance. Among that group of people, there were no extraordinaires who could spread the sensor network over hundreds of kilometers. Black Fog relaxed a little when he didn't see the enemy chasing him. He temporarily slowed down and diverted his attention to plan his next move. At this moment, a shockwave suddenly cut through the void. It was so strong and sharp that even his mind was in turmoil, giving him a fright. An expert had crossed the border. The shockwave came and left abruptly. Although it was strong, it left no traces. However, there was a penetrating and sharp intent that went straight to the depths of his spirit body. This wasn't an illusion. Black Fog seemed to be hit by a strong beam of light in an instant. The light shone through the bottom structure of his spirit body, and he felt that there was almost no privacy. Such an impact, if it landed, would definitely be a first-class spiritual killing method. Even in the out-of-body state, Black Fog evoked a hair-raising memory of his physical body. His spirit body froze in the air for almost a minute. After confirming that he was not injured, he finally knew how to think. Which deity had arrived? Looking at the direction, he should be going to the horned demon's side. Forget it, it's just a passing, it has nothing to do with me. Black Fog was sure that today was the day of his great misfortune. Everything was inappropriate. He couldn't stay any longer, so he suppressed all distracting thoughts, calmed his mind and fled far away without looking back. After Black Fog fled for another 10 kilometers, a raven commonly seen in the wilderness arrived late. It arrived above the area where Black Fog had been stunned for a long time. It circled several times but found nothing. Fuck, he ran away. After Monkey got the news, he didn't have the mood to hide anymore. In front of everyone he stomped his feet heavily. However, no one paid attention to him. Most people were communicating with the horned demon about the details of this transaction, preparing for the so-called gambling on luck later. Monkey wanted to vent again, but Fat Dragon suddenly updated his message. Seems to be still there. Huh. Fat Dragon rarely spoke with uncertain words and tone, so Monkey didn't dare to easily interpret it. He cautiously confirmed, "Who is still there?" Chapter 751. What an inexplicable fellow. 3,000 kilometers away at Beishan Lake in Ban City, Luo Nan rapped on the table, issuing a ridiculing evaluation. Yin Lu, who was combing through the information, raised her head. Which one? It's that black mist. It's a perfectly fine soul body, but it's turned into billowing smoke. Sir, the soul body of our Order of Black Mist is actually... That's the inevitable result of the interference between soul strength and the body. But this fellow is purely using a smokescreen. He's deliberately mystifying. He's got nothing better to do. Luo Nan slapped the table. He wouldn't tell Yin Lu that he was vexed because he needed to expend extra brain power to imitate this meaningless appearance. It was also because of this emotion that he could not stand the Black Fog's methods in other aspects. So he had to refute it. Luo Nan hastily drew a simple diagram in the work area. He grabbed the key link and fiercely criticized it. In essence, the soul-body state of the black mist was a disturbance wave that continuously radiated outwards, causing the order of the surrounding mental and material structures to go out of harmony. Therefore it was chaotic and disorderly. There were no rules to speak of. The more it was like this, the more the core of the soul body needed to maintain a balance. The black mist adopted a method of chaos on the outside but tranquility on the inside. There were two layers, the surface layer and the inside layer. The surface layer could toss about freely, while the inside layer was calm and tranquil. The advantage of this was that it was relatively stable. It wouldn't turn into a lunatic from the backlash of the chaotic disturbance waves. But the chaotic and disharmonious fluctuations flowed on the surface. The intensity of the interference between the mental and material planes couldn't rise. The information says that the black mist is proficient in curses. It's not good at attacking fortifications. This is the problem it was born with. This fellow really should study the knowledge of configuration in depth. He also needs to improve his courage and insight. What's the point of compromise and balance? Put more effort into the domain of rheological configuration. It seems chaotic but it's stable. It seems moving but it's static. Realize a kind of dynamic balance like a storm vortex. Won't its power increase instantly? This way it's easier to form a resonance with the storm of the abyss region. You're using the wrong frame of reference again. Yinlu didn't dare to say the words of ridicule in her mind. She didn't quite understand why Luo Nan wouldn't let go of the black mist, but she didn't have the obligation to plead leniency for this complete stranger. Luo Nan's criticism didn't affect him from doing proper business. Right now he was comparing the structure of the black mist's soul body. He imitated the disharmonious disturbance wave state vividly. As for whether the inner layer would choose static or dynamic, there was no need to think too much. He would definitely strive for perfection. In any case, the people outside all felt the same. While without the corresponding dye, the color of the black fog is a little lighter. I hope it won't be seen through soon. Soon the black fog spirit body reappeared on the wasteland, and the simulation was 70% to 80% similar. Of course, this imitation was an interference creation of the soul cloak, a tool that could be remotely controlled. It was still fundamentally different from an out-of-body spirit. The work was a little rough, but the timing wasn't bad. Just as the imitation was completed, the raven that acted as a surveillance carrier flapped its wings and flew past. Luo Nan originally didn't want to be in such a rush. He had already sent Yinlu to purchase raw materials. He was prepared to make Rui Wen go through the trouble of setting up a transmission array in this wasteland and teleporting her fleshly body once more. This way he could lock onto the coordinates of his grandfather's laboratory and conduct solid research and exploration. However, the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. The centaur actually married 2 people. After selling the official coordinates to the Toyama auction house, he squeezed out the remaining value from it and fooled a group of people to come over. Luo Nan certainly couldn't just sit and watch. It was a coincidence that he chose to enter as the black fog. He also had some helplessness. Coincidentally, this black fog was more suitable for him to temporarily impersonate. He didn't need to go through the link of the transmission array. He was helpless because of Dean Wan Tawan's sudden appearance. Luo Nan still didn't understand why Wan Tawan would meddle in this matter. However, he was fully aware that this staunch materialist sensitivity towards the changes in the material world was simply outrageous. The condensation ring as the foundation of the soul cloak had an effect on the water molecules in the surrounding environment. Others couldn't sense it, but it had already attracted Dean Wan's attention, just like Luo Yuan did a few days ago. Luo Nan still wanted to cover up a bit before clarifying Dean Wan's position. The necessary and unnecessary disguise was completed, but Luo Nan was a bit vexed for a time. What should he do next? The standard answer was to find the entrance to his grandfather's laboratory, to explore and protect it. However, the current situation was that Luo Nan had started searching long before he could analyze and impersonate the black fog. Luo Nan had already done several rounds of investigations while the centaur was spouting nonsense. Presumably, none of the participants were like him. Their perception could easily cover a radius of 300 kilometers. However, the preliminary investigations didn't yield any results. Luo Nan was worried that the centaur was talking irresponsibly. The radius of 300 kilometers was just an imaginary number. He expanded it by another 200 kilometers. Within 1,000,000 square kilometers from the stratosphere to nearly 100 meters underground, Luo Nan had practically searched the entire area. However, he still didn't find any traces of a laboratory door. Actually, this was the source of Luo Nan's vexed mood. The centaur's speech and explanation were nearing the end. Right now, he was using Cui Qinghe's question to make a conclusion about Luo Yuandao's wilderness laboratory. I believe that this laboratory is very likely to be a half-plane. I don't need a noun to explain something like this. It's more or less similar to the deep blue world or the Pacific Ocean right now. Of course, the scale can't be compared at all. You can view it as a cave, but there's no mountain base. There's only some sort of space-time depression or remnant. The centaur created his own noun without any burden. He cackled, I can't say more about the specifics. When we get there, we'll see if we understand. If we don't understand, then we don't understand. I just want to emphasize once more. Even if we get lucky and find the entrance to the laboratory, we lack the anchoring equipment. The door is unstable and the space is unstable. We can be ejected at any time. We can also disappear or die. I won't be responsible for the consequences that occur. What are you blindly blabbering about? If we keep messing around, that fellow Black Mist will really run away. Horse Monkey was really impatient. He chattered endlessly on the internal communications network to vent his frustration. Since he didn't run away before, he definitely won't leave now. On the internal communications network, Xianxia once again cooled down the agitated Horse Monkey. Right now, the crux of the matter lies in the fact that the laboratory door, which should have been easy to enter, has been buried in the hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of wasteland. We need to seize the time to dig out that door and stuff all these people in. That's the right thing to do. These people? You said it yourself. Each and every one of them is here to inspect the goods. Can we really get rid of them? Even if it's the previous plan, there's no need to get rid of all of them. Besides, that fellow Black Mist, you said that he's a perfect experimental subject. It's rare to have such a good target. If he's ruined by you, why don't you report this to the Pope and the true deity? Horse Monkey fell silent. But at this moment, Horned Demon, who was supposed to be giving a generous speech, seized an opportunity to interrupt the discussion. I've heard of that fellow Black Mist. He's a super coward. He wasn't lying when he said that he was leaving. Now that he has run 100 kilometers away, he has stopped. Perhaps he has discovered something new? Horse Monkey and Xianxia's eyes lit up. Horned Demon split his attention as he discussed in secret while wrapping up his speech. He clapped his hands and said, "Time is precious. It's time to test everyone's luck. I'll also reveal some information to everyone. It can be considered an advertisement. The Toyama Auction House's spring auction is on the 13th of next month. It's said that it will be held in some high seas. Therefore, in theory, the maximum time limit for our search and research is about half a month. Yes, it's hard to say if Toyama will intervene midway to preserve its value. It's fine as long as everyone has a plan." During this time, Xianxia asked Fat Dragon about the situation of the Black Mist, to which the latter simply replied, "I don't know. No matter what, it's a clue. Don't make it too obvious." Horse Monkey, charge ahead. I'll run a little further and flank him. Xianxia was still giving commands on the communication network, but when Horse Monkey saw that Horned Demon had finally wrapped things up, he eagerly ran in the direction where the Black Mist had left. Slightly later than Horse Monkey, Gardener, Tui Qinghe, and the others also agreed with Horned Demon's statement. They boarded their respective vehicles and prepared to carry out the search. Of course, Horned Demon's proposal to delay the final payment was also a very important factor. Gardener deliberately chose to pass by Horned Demon, parked the huge SUV in front of Horned Demon, and asked condescendingly, "What I'm more interested in is the extra benefit of a small situation that you mentioned. What is it?" Horned Demon replied instantly, "A key." "A key to open the door?" The specific form is, "A woman. A woman who has the ability to lock onto and open this door." Horned Demon's words nearly scared Xianxia, Horse Monkey, and the others, who were more than 10 kilometers away. They all sent messages on the communication network. "Are you crazy? Don't speak without thinking. Wu Jun is a very precious and exclusive resource. With her in hand, we can figure out many secrets. However, she only has half a month left on her shelf life. After the Toyama Auction House's spring auction, the secrets inside will be dug out in front of the world's top factions sooner or later. What's the use of grasping it? Is there enough time? Or is the parish preparing to bid? Or do you really think that the goddess of luck is my lover and that you can get her easily?" Horned Demon's words choked Xianxia and Horse Monkey. With Fat Dragon not expressing his stance, no one could stop him. On the SUV, Gardener's interest was piqued. "Do you have more detailed information?" "Of course." Hua Dian, who had been wandering around, turned back at some point in time and joined the conversation. "I also wish to obtain a piece of information to satisfy my curiosity." "Me too." Tui Qinghe's motorcycle also drove over. Horned Demon chuckled. No problem. Everyone who sees it has a share." The information transfer was quickly completed. Gardener was satisfied. He stepped on the accelerator, and the SUV stirred up a cloud of dust as it brushed past Horned Demon. He laughed and gave a thumbs up. "Happy sharing." Horned Demon stood like a nail in the flying dust, staring at the SUV in the distance. The smile on his lips did not diminish, but it became more and more distorted. Chapter 752. Scourge. Horned demon was a natural scourge. Luo Nan finally determined the nature of horned demon. He had been keeping an eye on horned demon all the way here. He believed that he had a general idea of what was going on in horned demon's mind, but he never expected that horned demon's desire for revenge would be this deep. Horned demon was already here, but Wu Jun was still unforgiving. He was clearly the one chasing horned demon, but now it seemed as if horned demon owed him a blood debt. Wu Jun and the Xia Luo order were already in dire straits when facing the colossus that was the Amaterasu order. If the powers behind Gardener Huadian and the others joined in, it would be hard to say how Wu Jun would respond. Polio, who was in Spring City, only had Yanfen by his side. The complex geographical environment around the Yuhol market wasn't enough to help them stay far away from danger. Speaking of which, Horned Demon was admittedly a madman, but his thoughts weren't limited to one place or one region. Instead, he could casually jump out of a rut and think about problems from the big picture. Perhaps the thoughts of a madman were more divergent, or perhaps he wished for the world to be in chaos. Luo Nan's 10 fingers crossed as he muttered to himself under the sunlight. Her Majesty Empress Wu's theory of being a match for 10,000 had awakened him early on, and he had the support of the mental sensor network that covered the entire world. His foundation was deep and broad, but Luo Nan had been affected by the counterexample of Snake Tongue in this series of events. Only then did he suddenly realize that he wasn't afraid of the danger of being devoured by extraordinaries. Compared to Horned Demon, Luo Nan seemed to be lacking a reckless spirit. Horned Demon wasn't the least bit afraid of adding variables to the situation. Rather than saying that he was naturally close to chaos, it would be better to say that this was the usual way of thinking of psychics. After all, psychics always had the talent and self-confidence to pluck clues from chaos. Of course, this was an implicit way of saying it. Looking at it from a different angle, it could be described as a headstrong person who couldn't see the big picture. If he couldn't come up with a logical and rigorous plan, then rolling in the mud with the enemy would be pretty good. During this process, he could use his rich combat experience to overwhelm the enemy, as he had learned a move. It could be said that when 3 people walk together, there will always be a teacher. Luo Nan didn't fly into a rage out of humiliation from being taught by Horned Demon. On the contrary, the frustration from not being able to find the door to the laboratory had shifted quite a bit. That's right, it was a transfer. Luo Nan's inspiration was stimulated by the muddy pond technique of the Horned Demon. It also spurred his emotions. Accomplishing things was hard, but destroying things was far too easy. It seems that I'm very far away from the mud pool. Even the centaur dares to play like this inside. It should be fine for me to throw a stinky egg far away, right? Within Luo Nan's sensory network, the skinny face that came from Ma Ho's face was suffused with an excited and cruel green light. It was practically overflowing, and Luo Nan felt a wave of annoyance when he saw it. The Amaterasu order, as well as the forces behind them, had the guts to lay their hands on his grandfather's laboratory. They should be prepared to face the consequences. Wait a minute, isn't it too easy for them to just have rotten eggs? Luo Nan suddenly stood up on the yacht ray in Ban City's Beishan Lake. He walked in circles within the limited deck area of the sunlight area. Yin Lu raised her head in astonishment. She first believed that Luo Nan had encountered some unsolvable problem, but after carefully observing him a few times, she felt that something was off. Looking at that wide grin on his face, he seemed to have fallen into some kind of indescribable excitement and was unable to extricate himself for a moment. Yin Lu opened her mouth, but in the end she decided to remain silent. This was because Luo Nan had walked a few circles at lightning speed before sitting back in his original position. He wrote vigorously in the virtual work area, sketching out blueprints. Luo Nan was skilled in the application of lines, and he had a vast and broad observation perspective. Therefore, Luo Nan was able to outline the topography of the Red Earth wasteland over 3,000 kilometers away with just a few strokes. It was hard not to be scribbled, but the necessary details weren't lacking at all. The larger ditches, underground rivers, surface lakes, waterways, and so on were all marked. The range was delineated, and then came the scattered combinations of dots, lines, and surfaces. They endlessly tumbled, wandered, joined, and combined within the virtual work area. The complex structure was constructed within 2 or 3 breaths of time. Even made Yin Lu feel dizzy. The heavens took pity on her. Yin Lu only seriously considered the logical relationship between a few details. She had crammed a lot of knowledge on configuration during this time. Regardless of its practical value, it was a shortcut to get closer to Luo Nan. But what this shortcut brought her was dizziness, and even the structure of her body and soul was about to be shaken and overturned. Lu hurriedly closed her eyes. She didn't dare to look. Clearly the gap between her and Luo Nan was too great. She was completely unqualified to evaluate on the technical level. She didn't even have the qualifications to review it. Therefore she could only consider and judge from a more simple and intuitive perspective. Let's first set up a reference. Lu had a hand-drawn draft of Luo Nan's in her hands. It was the illustration he had made when he explained the connection of energy between Snake Tongue and Mr. Zhou Weiman. Lu once believed that it would be one of the most complex blueprints she had ever seen in her life. But now the configuration diagram, which had just begun to be drawn, looked to be several times more complex than the previous draft. Lu really couldn't hold back the curiosity in her heart. She waited for a moment when Luo Nan stopped drawing and asked softly, "Mr. I'm building a muddy pond." "I'm building a muddy pond. Let's see how those people roll around. Let's do this for now. I'll make a simple diagram. I'll fill in the details later." Lu subconsciously narrowed her eyes. She quickly shot a glance at the virtual work area. Forgive her for not having a high level of understanding, but the combination of configurations that made her dizzy were really hard to relate to the so-called simple diagram. A distance of 100 kilometers was actually nothing to the feet of a B-rank powerhouse. The amount of time Luo Nan spent fiddling with the configuration was enough for Horse Monkey to cross the wasteland and close the distance between the two to within 20 kilometers. Horse Monkey knew the depths of the black mist. The process of chasing and killing in his early years made him very clear that the black mist didn't excel in mental senses. The limit of the black mist's sensing radius was approximately 300 meters. Moreover, it was very unstable. However, the warning trigger line constructed on this basis could reach as far as 10 kilometers away. It was worthy of the evaluation of a coward. For the sake of not alerting the snake, Horse Monkey suppressed the simple thought process of walking straight ahead. He very cautiously stopped 15 kilometers away and contacted Fatty Dragon once more to confirm the current situation of the black mist. Fatty Dragon expressed, "He's still there." "He's always been there?" "Yes. He's been there for at least 20 minutes. He doesn't advance, he doesn't retreat. It doesn't seem like his style." Suspicion rose in Horse Monkey's heart. Now that he was mulling over it, it was getting closer and closer to the speculation of the Horned Demon. Could it be that the black mist had some dog's hit luck and had really discovered something? He disappeared. Fatty Dragon suddenly updated his information. Horse Monkey was startled. "He ran away again?" "He disappeared." Fatty Dragon said the same words, but his mood was a bit more serious. Horse Monkey thought of many scenarios in the blink of an eye, but none of them were reliable. While he was in a daze, his extraordinary intuition, formed from years of experience in the wasteland, suddenly awakened and rang in his mind. At the same time, the air in the surrounding area vibrated. There was a clear change in the lighting of the external environment. The shadow was like a canopy covering his head. Horse Monkey raised his head in shock as he followed the vibrating sound and the angle of the light shadow. He saw a rolling black cloud appear 30 meters in the sky. It was unknown when, but it was dark and gloomy. From time to time it would change between light and dark. It was as if it had intercepted the sunlight from the vault of heaven, causing it to transform into a dark, treacherous and extremely ominous color. "Horse Monkey!" Fatty Dragon's shout came crashing over. Horse Monkey's heart sank and he felt a little dizzy. It was only at this moment that he suddenly realized that he had been facing this ominous cloud for too long. There seemed to be an invisible attraction inside the dark cloud, hooking his soul, and he could not move away. This is bad. After waking up, Horse Monkey reacted instinctively. Faced with the seemingly harmless dark cloud, he immediately bounced backward, wanting to get out of the shadow formed by the dark cloud. It was also at this moment that a ray of light shone down from the dark cloud. The color was so frivolous that it was like a nightclub spotlight with a spot lens. However, it did not give him any time to think or react. It hit its mark. Horse Monkey was momentarily dazed. He leaped backward, which he would not make a mistake even if he had done it hundreds or thousands of times, inexplicably turned into a ridiculous and laughable diving error. The world spun around him, and then his face was forcefully smashed into the dry, hard red soil. "It's a curse." Horse Monkey was glad that he could still make an accurate judgment, and his state of mind was still fine. Against the black mist, this was an acceptable price to pay. He did not even think about his ridiculous mistake. Instead, he rolled on the ground and adjusted his posture. At the same time, his soul power reached into the abyss, and he prayed to the Fusang divine tree that was already in position. The Fusang divine tree system of the Amaterasu cult was said to have 10 parallel suns. Each sun wheel represented a stairway to the heavens of the divine treasure. Even most of the believers, including Horse Monkey, could not reach the highest level of the ladder to receive the supreme divine treasures into their bodies. However, even the branches, leaves, and roots that had absorbed a little bit of divine power still possessed power that ordinary aptitude users could not imagine. Horse Monkey had chosen the path of exorcism, which was the best choice against the Black Mist. Against a spiritual expert like the Black Mist who was proficient in curses and attacks without form, there was no need to consider a fair duel. He had to use the most direct and effective method to crush it with absolute advantage. Horse Monkey had absolute confidence. Even though he was slightly weaker than the Black Mist back then, after joining the Amaterasu cult and receiving the blessing of the Fusang divine tree system, even if he had a bad start, he could instantly increase his strength level and counterattack. Moreover, he was surrounded by Fat Dragon, a powerhouse who stood at the top of the architect level. As long as he could hold the situation back, Fat Dragon could suck the dark cloud and black mist into his stomach. Chapter 753. The prayers on the spiritual level, the physical mudra, and the secret words had all been uttered. However, the coordinated movements of body, mouth, and mind, which should have been one, had inexplicably turned into a clumsy performance. No matter how casual the Amaterasu cult was, the power of the fundamental system of divine treasures was not something that could be easily summoned. Ma Hou did not even understand why his most secretive thoughts would instantly jump to a completely irrelevant and absurd concept. He had already lost his last chance to link with the system of the Fusang divine tree. The follow-up attack of the black fog arrived. Countless cursed rays rained down on him like a storm, crashing into his body and his mind, drowning him in an instant. Initially, Ma Hou still wanted to struggle, but under the effect of the curse, his sense of coordination and balance had been completely destroyed. Any slight exertion of force would result in a conflict with the movements of the upper and lower parts of the body, and it would lead to unpredictable consequences. His struggle had become a fatal catalyst. In a breath's time, he had completely fallen into a disorderly nightmare from the inside out, from his soul to his body. Every muscle was twitching and trembling, and every nerve had turned into a dancing snake. There was no logic to speak of. Even though he was stuck to the dry and hard ground, he could still enter a state of extreme excitement. He subconsciously wriggled up and down on the ground, then shivered and lay on the ground, like an old dog that had its final radiance. Save me. Ma Hou could no longer care about anything else. He tried to call for help, but all that came out of his throat were meaningless grunts. He wanted to project his thoughts to the internal communication network, but his mind was also messed up by the swarm of distracting thoughts. If this continued, Ma Hou suspected that the structure of his body and soul would fall apart at any time. Before that happened, his will was already on the verge of collapse. Suddenly, a bang sound exploded in his ears. The horse monkey had no idea where he came from, but right after that, the endless rays of cursed light were suddenly cut off. Seemed like it. The horse monkey's senses had dropped to the lowest point ever since he was born. He could only vaguely feel that his chaotic, disordered, and disorderly state seemed to have been alleviated. The stench of saliva, blood, and mud on his face finally stimulated his corresponding senses. Of course, there was also the feeling of stickiness. Ma Hou didn't even need to look in the mirror to know that his snot, tears, and blood were mixed with mud on his face. He subconsciously turned over, and he actually succeeded. Sunlight shone down, and the shadow that covered his body and soul in the middle had disappeared at some point. But then warm liquid drops and broken feathers sprinkled on his face and body like burrs. As for this logical relationship, he no longer had the energy to think about it. He panted heavily, and it was only then that he felt the torment of his internal organs. A strong feeling of nausea and the feeling of losing control worked together. A stream of heat gushed out from his throat, eyes, and even his nostrils like a fountain. But in essence, it was the filth stored in his stomach. It sprayed high, but in the blink of an eye, it sprayed all over his face. "I'll kill you. I'll kill you." Ma Hou mumbled as he opened and closed his mouth, but the filth poured in again. He screamed and jumped up without caring about anything else. In the blink of an eye, he fell to the ground and vomited. How unfortunate. Are you all right? Jingxin's concern came late, but he didn't appear. His true body was still 30 kilometers away, and he only sent his greetings through the internal communication network. Ma Hou was about to vomit his bile out, so he wasn't in the mood to bother with him. Jingxin also knew of Ma Hou's situation and guessed that he likely didn't know what had happened later. He gave a simple introduction. Fat Dragon exploded the surveillance vessel and used his flesh and blood to cast a curse that struck the black fog. That fellow was likely injured, but he still managed to escape. Fat Dragon is searching, but there's not much hope. Phew. Ma Hou was still panting heavily. He didn't expect Fat Dragon to avenge him, nor did he expect Jingxin to help him up. They addressed each other as brothers only because of the need for action. Hiding their relationship as members of the Amaterasu cult was also a requirement for action. They knew each other very well. They were all cold people by nature. Even when Fat Dragon had saved him previously, it was likely because he felt that he could succeed. Under such circumstances, there was no need for Ma Hou to feel resentful. Bullshit. He wanted to lash out at anyone he saw, but there was only desolate red soil around him. In fact, he had indeed ravaged the desolate plains. Now there was a shallow pit in the ground, and his crotch was wet and uncomfortable. What a nightmarish memory. F***K. 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 Ma Hou slammed the ground with all his might, causing dust to fly up. If he were a person who wanted to be dignified, he might have slit his own throat. Ma Hou wasn't that bad, but the moment he thought of the scene from before, he couldn't help but see stars as his organs burned. He couldn't understand or accept it. That fellow, the Black Fog, a coward who only knew how to backstab others, had become so terrifying. It was also a curse-style attack. It was a method that completely wiped out balance and coordination from the body and soul structure and psyche. It was impossible to defend against or dodge. If Fat Dragon hadn't taken action, Ma Hou would definitely have died. And the power that ultimately killed him would likely have originated from him. Anger, humiliation, and fear. Negative emotions surged as they constantly drained Ma Hou's energy. He had no intention of getting up. At that moment, Jingxin urged him. Are you feeling better? If you are, get up and get to work. Go F***, King Dai. Jingxin wasn't angry. Were you beaten up by the Black Fog again? Alright, let's be serious. Go take a look at the spot where the Black Fog was previously. Look at what? Remember the horned demon's speculation? At present, Fat Dragon hasn't caught the Black Fog, but that fellow has been circling the vicinity without leaving. This doesn't match his cowardly personality at all. Perhaps he really discovered something. Don't be fooled by the fact that he's hiding somewhere. Once we dig out what he's trying to hide, I guarantee he'll jump higher than anyone else. Ma Hou's face twitched. Regardless of his mood, he had indeed heard what Jingxin said. Jingxin struck while the iron was hot. It's not appropriate for me to appear. It's ideal for an enemy like you to go. Don't worry. Fat Dragon and I will protect you. None of your business. Ma Hou spat and spat out the remaining filth in his mouth. He took off his shirt, revealing his thin torso. He wiped his face with the corner of his barely clean shirt, clenched his teeth, and walked towards the target area more than 10 kilometers away. At the end of the day, he was still a B-class expert. Moreover, he was the type of person whose mental and physical aspects were more balanced. When he lost his coordination, he was in a more miserable state. This was equivalent to losing his greatest advantage. From this perspective, the Black Fog did have a certain restraining effect on him. However, when he regained his senses and adjusted his recovery speed, it was still quite shocking. At the beginning, he was still dragging his muddy steps, and it was difficult and sluggish. After adapting to the 1 kilometer distance, his speed increased rapidly, and he soon recovered his agile and nimble body movement. Other than the sour smell all over his body, which he could not get rid of immediately, and the obvious stains on his crotch area, he was a good man again. Furthermore, during this process, Jingxin had also sent an olive branch. Oh no, it was the propping mulberry tree's branch. That fellow had learned from the horse monkey's lesson and completed the prayer a long time ago. He established a connection with the Fusang divine tree, in the abyss area, guiding its power and assimilating it. At this moment he connected with the horse monkey and shared a portion of his perception. He could also use the power of the Fusang divine tree to help the horse monkey gradually stabilize its emotions. When they were still 2 to 3 kilometers away from the target, Jingxin suddenly said, "Something's wrong." Black fog. The horse monkey's hair nearly stood on end. "No, it's just that the feeling here is very different from other places. It's as though some power has interfered with it. There are remnant traces. Horn demon is indeed a spirit medium. Yes, the black fog isn't bad either. It really made him discover a problem." Jingxin was somewhat excited. The horse monkey finally jumped out of the shadows of the black fog and thought of the most important mission they had come for today. "Is this the laboratory's door?" "Yes, it's still too early to make a conclusion. We need to observe further, but the possibility is very high." Jingxin analyzed the black fog's behavior in passing. That fellow, the black fog, came for Luo Yuandao's laboratory, but it wasn't willing to take the risk. However, after passing by and seeing some clues, it dispelled the thought of leaving and wanted to monopolize it. This is very much in line with the thoughts of a treasure hunter, but it's not the thoughts of an appraiser. Yes, it's quite reliable. Jingxin gave his analysis a thumbs up before contacting the horned demon. "Quick, come over and take a look. Let's see if it matches." In a blink of an eye, he said to the horse monkey, "Be careful. The black fog might jump out at any moment." However, Jingxin's judgment was wrong this time. The black fog didn't appear again, as though it no longer had any thoughts about this place. Or perhaps it had suffered an incurable injury from its previous battle with Fat Dragon. Fat Dragon, who had failed in his pursuit, couldn't make a judgment either. He had completely lost track of the black fog. Jingxin analyzed again. "Perhaps it's afraid. Your relationship with Fat Dragon will likely be exposed. Your identity can't be hidden anymore. Thankfully, everyone knows that he doesn't like to use his brain. It's very normal for him to have someone as his secretary. However, you aren't very competent as a secretary. I'm going to kill him." This him was naturally referring to him. When the horse monkey didn't see the black fog, his terrible emotions surged again. He paced back and forth on the red ground that didn't look any different. He was extremely vexed. His footsteps became heavier and heavier. Finally, he couldn't help but stomp his feet to vent his frustration. 1 kick, 2 kicks, 3 kicks. There was a muffled sound and the red soil under his feet suddenly collapsed. Before horse monkey could regain his balance, there was another long chi sound and hot steam gushed out. Although it was not enough to hurt horse monkey, who was a B-class expert, it still gave him a fright. His crotch instinctively shrank back and he jumped back. "What's that?" Chapter 754. Monkey certainly did not want more people to see him in such a pathetic state. However, things did not go as he wished. The search, which was purely based on luck, had just begun. Most people were still wandering aimlessly without a clear direction. At this time, a small change or accident could easily attract people's attention. At the same time as Jing Xin had said, the minds of treasure hunters and the surveyors were completely different. As the designers behind the scenes, the Amaterasu sect's way of thinking was closer to that of the surveyors. Hence, sharing information and increasing efficiency became the best choice. From Monkey's humiliating failure to the discovery of a geothermal geyser, the entire process took about half an hour. The time taken to attract others was even shorter. In less than 20 minutes, most of the participants had gathered around the newly discovered geothermal mud area. To be precise, except for Anthony, the priest, and Vanta, the dean of the Welfare Institute, everyone else had arrived to study the latest discovery. Of course, they also had to eliminate the black fog that had been chased away by Fatty Dragon. With so many people here, Monkey, as the first discoverer, had to give a reason. At this time, hiding the truth was not an option. Only a fool would reveal everything. After discussing with Jingxin and company, Horse Monkey described the old grudge between him and the black fog in a deadpan manner. He casually summarized the pursuit and the subsequent analysis and pursuit, completing the relevant logical chain. Of course, some of the hidden meanings needed to be discovered by smart people. There was no shortage of smart people on the scene. Gardner stared at Monkey's face and did not hide his ridicule at all. "It sounds like you drove the black fog away and then found this place that he was trying to hide. But looking at you now, it looks more like a victory. Also, although I'm not good at sensing, the abyss area seemed to be very lively just now. Brother Monkey, the black fog, who else was it?" Gardner then looked at Fatty Dragon, who was also staring at him expressionlessly. Their eyes met. Even though Gardner was also a burly man compared to the huge fat dragon, he was still an order of magnitude weaker, and it was the same in terms of strength. Gardner looked unruly, but he had his own plans. He did not want to lose to Fatty Dragon, who was one of the top grade B powerhouses. He laughed and waved his hand. We all know what's going on with Fatty Dragon. One or two more of you from the Amaterasu cult won't scare me to death. Why do you have to be so secretive? Moreover, it's not a good habit to neglect work for personal reasons. Fat Dragon was always numb and stiff. Ma Ho's face turned green, red, and green. It changed back and forth 7 or 8 times, but in the end he still clenched his teeth and didn't say anything. At this time, the centaur stood up in a timely manner and mediated in a decent manner. As I said, this is an uncertain opportunity. It is a gamble. I don't mind if any party wants to increase the probability of harvest by increasing their investment. In fact, I welcome it. Of course, I also hope that I can open less SMUF accounts to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. But then again, compared to Fatty Dragon and you guys opening SMUF accounts, I am more dissatisfied with Mr. Black Mist, who slipped away. Everyone has paid the price and none of us want to miss the opportunity. That's why I propose the idea of sharing. Only when we get our hands on the treasure can we talk about distribution. In fact, the word distribution was almost meaningless in Luo Yuandao's laboratory. It was indeed a huge fortune, but to dig a piece of the treasure mountain, it still required enough knowledge, insight, and luck. In this context, cooperation and sharing were more important. I have emphasized this point many times, but that narrow-minded guy, Black Mist, still sees this operation as a crude and low-level treasure hunting operation. He said that he wants to quit, but in fact he wants to take everything for himself. So that guy has pissed me off. If he dares to show up again, I will stand on your side, Mr. Ma Ho. The centaur, Ma Ho, and Fatty Dragon had unified their positions, but it was not suspicious. After all, no matter what the crazy centaur decided, it was not surprising. Similarly, whoever he stood with, other than the enemy, his teammates were no exception. Gardner responded with a smile. I don't mind helping to get rid of a stingy guy, but I would like to have reliable and useful information. What I'm more interested in right now is what the Black Fog has discovered. Can anyone give me a definite answer? At present, it seems to be a geothermal hot spring. While the few of them were reflecting their positions, Hua Dian had already circled around the mud several times. At this time he casually analyzed, the plateau north of the Himalayas has always been an area rich in geothermal energy. It is not strange for a geothermal hot spring and mud to appear here. I have checked the topographic map, and there is an underground waterway nearby that is connected to the surface saltwater lake dozens of kilometers away. Gardner laughed again when he heard that. Oh, it seems that you're quite lucky, monkey. If you stomped your feet a little harder earlier, you might have broken through the magma chamber below. That kind of feeling. Ma Ho glared at Gardner. He really had a taste of this guy's foul mouth. Compared to Gardner, who only wanted to take advantage of others with his mouth, Hua Dian, who was a detective, was more interested in the environment around the geothermal hot spring mud pool and the traces left behind. There is still some distance between the underground aquifer and the surface. The heat pipes in the magma chamber don't seem to be enough to form a huge water pressure, causing it to gush out. In comparison, Mr. Ma Ho's stomping seems even more insignificant. Therefore, I think that between the two stimulating elements of the magma chamber and the stomping of feet, there should be another stimulating force. Even now it is still in effect. But we are close at hand, yet we can't detect it. Seeing that someone had cut to the chase, Jingxin immediately raised his hand in agreement. I have never been to the deep blue world, nor do I know how the plane affects the structure of space-time. However, this mechanism is also something I have never heard of or seen before, so I would like to ask Mr. Ma Ho. Is it possible for the portal to Luo Yuandao's laboratory to be transferred to the surface? Just like the portal to the deep blue world, it is located 10,000 meters deep at the bottom of the sea? Ma Ho frowned. He really couldn't be sure about this matter. The laboratory portal I saw was pulled by an exclusive instrument. Therefore, even if it moves, it is limited to a certain extent. Now that all the instruments have been removed, I don't know if the portal will directly sink into the ground. Tens of hundreds of meters deep in the ground seems to be meaningless for such a huge spacetime structure. Chapter 755. The people around them looked at each other and saw the fear in each other's eyes. In an unknown and destined complex environment, it was too difficult for a group of psychics who were known for their sensitivity to be squeezed together. This might be a bewitching array. Cui Qinghe of the Order of Justice was one of the few physical experts in the group, so he was more used to such an environment. However, he also expressed a cautious attitude. We haven't discovered anything related to the laboratory's door. All our suspicions stem from the appearance of this mud, at the periphery of the search zone? Are you saying that this might be a joke by the Black Fog? Yes, a nasty joke. Jingxin and Horned Demon quickly communicated through the internal communication network, but they were unsure in the end. It was necessary to investigate, but how to investigate and whether it was worth investing a lot of time and energy was a problem that needed to be determined. Hua Dian, on the other hand, made a suggestion. I have a Dao mark, a gadget that I made myself. It can basically be understood as a kind of paint that can mark the effects of various powers. It's especially sensitive to beyonder powers, which is the interaction between the mind and matter. I can put it down to verify it. The others understood what he meant. Luo Yuandao's laboratory, which they were searching for, could basically be considered a natural effect. If they discovered strong traces of beyonder powers, there was no need to say anything. It was a counterfeit nest and everyone could just turn around and leave. Jingxin raised his hand and suggested, we have to probe deeper. We can't sense it at the moment, so it might be because the place of effect is relatively hidden. For example, it might be hidden near the magma chamber's lava pipes and directly trigger an eruption. It's not impossible for the Black Fog's spirit body to do this. That's natural, but my abilities are limited. In such a complex area, I can at most make the Dao marker sink 100 meters or so. Compared to the thickness of the Earth's crust, it's just too insignificant. To be able to form a geothermal mud hot spring, the rock layer should be relatively thin. As long as we can probe the fault zone beneath the hot spring, it'll be fine. Something like stimulating the magma chamber and causing the water storage rock layer to break is not something that the Black Fog, who can only draw circles and curse, can do. Gardner, who had the worst mouth, had a rare analysis and most people agreed with him. As he spoke, he even walked to the back of his off-road vehicle. Under the watchful eyes of the group, he took out a box of equipment from the trunk. He then opened the front and back doors of the car as well as the cover of the car's roof. The interface of the dashboard, which was rich in functions, was revealed. I can add another round of assistance. In the complicated terrain of the wasteland, I believe in the equipment more than my own senses. The centaur whistled. Inside the equipment box that Gardner took out were precision components that were neatly arranged. Some of them were slightly combined to form a round probe ball. Although the functions of the A9 detector produced by Lamar don't seem to be top-notch, it is the most portable professional instrument in the field of complex terrain exploration. It had a wealth of functional modules such as optical imaging, metal detection, life detection, terrain mapping. You could always find the one that suited you. While the advertising time was over, there was still one problem to solve. In this kind of mud, normal propellers can't work, not to mention the underground rock formation and water flow. I need a buddy who can provide power at least to help this little thing cross the harsh area in front. When it enters the underground river, it will be more sensitive than any living fish. Several B-level aptitude users looked left and right, and finally, their eyes all focused on Fat Dragon's face. The latter turned around and left without saying a word. Ma Ho then endured the gazes of all parties and his thin face barely squeezed out a smile. He's going to find a suitable tool. It shouldn't take long. In fact, only about 7 or 8 minutes later, Fat Dragon reappeared in everyone's field of vision. He was still holding a living thing that looked like a frog in his hand. Hua Dian was knowledgeable and recognized it at once. Cloth bag demon frog, a specialty of the plateau. This is rare. Fat Dragon asked Gardner for the probe ball, and Hua Dian had already stuffed his beacon into the storage area of this thing before. The probe ball was in his left hand and the demon frog was in his right. It was obvious that the probe ball, which was about the size of a volleyball, was much bigger than the cloth bag demon frog. But Fat Dragon didn't care. He squeezed the cloth bag demon frog twice, and after 2 muffled croaks, the greenish-gray cloth bag demon frog began to expand rapidly. It even opened its mouth, and its cracked upper and lower jaws were even more exaggerated than the diameter of its expanding body. It easily stuffed the probe ball in. With a few wriggles of its tough skin and flesh, the probe ball firmly sank into the abdomen of the cloth-bagged demon frog and kept spinning. Genius idea. Gardner snapped his fingers and turned on the probe ball. After adjusting the parameters and eliminating the influence of the skin and flesh of the cloth-bagged demon frog, he confirmed that everything was correct and made an okay gesture. Fat Dragon threw away the demon frog that had really expanded into a bulging cloth bag in his hand and threw the mutant into the still churning mud. Due to the terrible environmental conditions, the optical imaging module of the probe ball was not turned on. However, the thermal imaging and various detection wave technologies were still trustworthy, and the network connection was still stable. As the cloth-bagged demon frog sank, the structure of the lower layer of the geothermal mud hot spring that suddenly emerged was gradually outlined and enriched with details on the projection screen of the control panel of Gardner's SUV. Gardner acted as a temporary technician and he was very used to the role. As he continued to adjust the relevant parameters, the outline and change trend of the soil, rock strata, and water flow were constantly smeared in the projection area. There was also more detailed data such as temperature, pH, and the composition of various elements. After eliminating the interference of the cloth-bagged demon frog's body, it appeared one after another. These pictures and data were enough for everyone to make some preliminary judgments. Gardner explained while operating, and he was basically able to reach a consensus with everyone. The soil and rock strata are relatively thin. Most of the area is like this, and it's possible that it was broken by the high pressure. The mineral composition is more complicated, and it's closer to the magma chamber below. It should be a metamorphic rock that was formed due to the influence of the magma chamber. This is the result of a long period of time. The youngest trace here is probably the radiation residue from World War III. The temperature continues to rise and the magma chamber is indeed more active. Anyway, I refuse to go down to explore with my body. Hey, Mr. Detective, is there any reaction from your paint? There is. Fortunately, it will show different thermal gradients, which is convenient for the instrument to sense. Hua Dian asked if he could join in the operation. After getting Gardner's permission, he adjusted some of the parameters in the thermal imaging system. In the blink of an eye, the interface that was still relatively clear was covered in overly gorgeous colors. Hey. Sorry, allow me to simplify. How about this? I'll set the effect of transcendent power to red, and the other natural forces to white. This will be the most intuitive. Chapter 756. Tisde. There are many capable people in this world. That was quite dangerous. Luo Nan sighed. He reached out to scratch his head and let out a sigh. Yin Lu had raised her head for the umpteenth time to look at Luo Nan. He felt quite helpless. Luo Nan was completely immersed right now, but he was definitely not a calm and unperturbed manipulator behind the scenes. He would sigh and comment from time to time. He couldn't even be considered a qualified spectator. At least for Yin Lu, a pitiful person who couldn't even be a spectator, it was far too cruel. Yin Lu felt like a cat was scratching her heart. What in the world happened in the wasteland 3,000 kilometers away? What kind of reaction would happen when 10 B-rank powerhouses converge under the arrangement of an inconceivable person like Luo Nan? Such a scene did not happen every year, even in the inner world. Luo Nan was able to observe the process of transformation, let alone from a godlike perspective. Right? Yin Lu really didn't know how Luo Nan was able to observe the scene 3,000 kilometers away. She was unable to understand what kind of perspective it was. The more it was like this, the more her curiosity rapidly expanded. Soon, it crushed the sense of responsibility and professionalism that a secretary should have. In the end, she couldn't help but open her mouth and whisper, Mr.? Mr.? Yes. Mr. Can you tell me the current situation over there? My intelligence analysis will be useful. It was thanks to Yin Li's long experience in the business world that she didn't blush and expose herself for such a terrible reason. However, she still successfully attracted Luo Nan's attention. He turned to look at her and blinked. Soon he came to a realization. You want to know the situation over there? You want to see? Yin Lu hurriedly nodded. It was bad to be reserved at times like this. Appropriate intimacy was what set her apart from a workaholic like He Yuan. Yin Lu admired herself for being able to find such a powerful reason for herself in such a short amount of time. Reality proved that this move was really effective. Right now, the group of people in the wasteland were still tossing and turning around things like instruments and road signs. The pace was relatively calm, and Luo Nan had the leisure time to chat with Yin Lu. In truth, Yin Li's request was a bit excessive, but Luo Nan didn't mind. Ever since he entered the inner world circle, he was mostly fawned upon by his friends in the Xia City branch due to his young age. He created trouble and the others helped him deal with the trouble. Even if someone made some requests, they would think it over and over again to ensure that it was within a reasonable range. Someone like Yin Lu, who clearly knew that she was crossing the line, but still acted like a spoiled child and begged. Well, this could be counted as acting like a spoiled child. At the very least, this kind of method was rare. So Luo Nan didn't feel offended. On the contrary, he felt that this was rather novel and interesting. He didn't want to refuse. At the same time, he was used to considering problems from the perspective of others. After pondering for a while, he said, "It's fine if you want to see it, really?" Yin Li's eyes were immediately filled with joy. Even she couldn't tell how much of it was real and how much of it was embellished. Luo Nan didn't care about these little details. He just followed his established train of thought and continued speaking. "There's a problem. You need to be mentally prepared. I'm afraid you're not used to it. Yes, you're temporarily unable to adapt to the impact of the information flow on my sensory network. It's definitely impossible to directly sense it. Do you understand what I mean?" Yin Lu was startled and frowned. "I can roughly understand. The amount of information collected by a spiritual network that was several thousand kilometers away was undoubtedly enormous. Needless to say, Luo Nan's perception ability was close to that of a god. The pressure was certainly not something that an average person could endure. So, if you really want to see it immediately, I can only help you transfer it. It won't be a direct, comprehensive clairvoyance. Instead, I'll help you filter it. I'll let you see what you see." Wasn't this very normal? Yin Lu immediately responded, "This isn't a problem. No. You don't understand what I mean. If you want to accept my transfer, then you need to accept the stimulation I give you on the mental plane. It goes deep into the various planes of the senses. It isn't real to you and it's easy to confuse you." At the same time, Yin Lu already understood halfway through Luo Nan's words. She understood it very thoroughly. The only thing she didn't understand was whether this underage gentleman before her was displaying his true colors as a straight man or if he was trying to open up a new domain of social relations. Since this was the case, Yin Lu stopped short and replied, "I've studied Mr.'s theory. I can understand." Luo Nan's prison theory had an extremely famous invasion thesis. It referred to the fact that there was no public space on the mental plane. There was only the difference between being active and being passive. Active contact and invasion had similar meanings. This thesis exposed the direct and crude nature of the mental domain. It left a deep impression on people. Even if one wasn't on the mental side, one could still say 1 thing, 2, 3, 4, let alone a professional like Yin Lu. "I don't mind. I can't mind. Whether it was 4 months ago when the madam asked for your help or the long period of time that followed, I had to adapt and accept these things." These words flashed through Yin Li's mind, but she didn't say them out loud. Being overly straightforward and revealing wouldn't help the two deepen their relationship. Instead, it would cause the subtle and harmonious atmosphere to turn into the most awkward of situations. This was the subtlety of humans. Even if the other knew the thoughts in each other's hearts, even if there were more straightforward actions, there would always be a buffer space as long as the other didn't say it out loud. There were all sorts of emotions and delusions that could be wantonly operated within this space, developing countless possibilities. This buffer space was the area that Yin Lu was working hard to manage in the present and future. She would only expand this space, not the other way around. In comparison, Luo Nan was the one who truly revealed his true colors as a straight man. On this level, he was still an immature little boy. He lacked the ability to control complex and subtle relationships. He always wanted to express something, to expose something, to let everything operate under the control of reason. As a god, he had the qualifications to pursue this kind of model. But as a man, he was far from being mature. Yin Li's state of mind was a bit excited when her thoughts touched upon this level, but she controlled these subtle changes very well. She didn't deliberately express her affection. Instead, she used the most businesslike attitude to look at Luo Nan attentively. "What do I need to do in order to receive your information, mister?" "Well, you basically don't need to do anything. I'll gradually introduce the information and form the relevant stimulation. Let's slowly try it out and see what level is most appropriate." Chapter 757. Lu obeyed Luo Nan's orders. She sat upright, crossed her hands on her knees and closed her eyes. The light from the outside world only left behind a faint red shadow that passed through her eyelids. The bright colors that came from over 3,000 kilometers away quickly flooded the boundaries of her senses and surged in. No, this wasn't the true scenery of the wasteland. Instead, it was a gift from the godlike yet immature boy beside her. When this rippling thought spread out, the vivid images of Centaur, Fat Dragon, Gardener, Huadian, and other grade B powerhouses that only existed in the intelligence data were also reflected in this filtered color environment one after another. Lu saw that everyone who participated in this transaction, aside from Black Mist, Anthony, and Wan Ta, had gathered at the edge of a churning pool of mud. They surrounded a projection area on top of an off-road vehicle and started discussing. The atmosphere was quite lively. They're probing this mud pool that I created to see if there are any traces of supernatural power. Luo Nan explained what happened before to Lu in a few words. Lu asked in shock, "Have they already discovered it? Have they realized that there's someone behind them?" "Not yet." Luo Nan explained in a bit more detail on this point. "It's true that I used a configuration and corresponding supernatural power to create this mud pool and the other things after it. However, the point of use was buried a bit deeper in order to make full use of the terrain's geothermal energy. From the looks of it, it's still far beyond the range of their probing. On the other hand, the traces left behind by some interference effects when they were observing their senses are quite heavy. Fortunately, they didn't think that I was listening to them while they were discussing, so they gave me a chance to destroy the corpses and erase the traces. Of course, this is also because Detective Hua Dian's sensing precision is only on the micron level. Although the road mark he made is quite ingenious in structure and has a few bonuses, it's still a bit difficult to reach the level of water molecules." Lu, who was a specialist in the mental side, had no confidence to discuss this topic at all. However, Luo Nan still used his unique frame of reference to reflect on himself. "Actually, this can be considered luck. The group of people here, whether it's Hua Dian or the others here, aren't experts in this field. Dean Wan Ta, who isn't here, shouldn't be inferior to me in terms of sensing precision. His sensitivity to changes in physical properties will only be stronger than mine. I can only surpass him in terms of range and breadth. Therefore, in order to ensure a stable layout, I need to put more effort into the configuration design. I need to utilize the power of nature as much as possible to build a ladder of interference on the mental plane. This is my mother's specialty. Dean Wan is also very proficient in it, but he certainly won't be happy to hear this description." Lu was able to understand some of Luo Nan's words, but she was better at chatting. She introduced the corresponding material at the right time. "I once heard the madam say that when there is an enormous disparity in the precision and breadth of the senses between people, the weak are simply unable to touch the lower limits of the domain of the strong. The weak are at a loss. It is as if they have encountered an unfathomable fate. They can only be controlled by the so-called fate." This was undoubtedly a compliment. Even if Luo Nan lacked social experience, he could still hear the hidden meaning in Li's words. He laughed out loud, but it wasn't because he was flattered. At the very least, it wasn't completely. "Just so happens that I've heard of a saying. It's specifically for us psychics and it's related to fate. When we successfully communicate with the spirit, we can capture the development of the situation. It's the same as flirting with the goddess of fate." His voice suddenly faded away. Luo Nan instinctively felt that this topic wasn't suitable to continue. He pursed his lips. It just so happened that the people by the quagmire had reached a consensus. Aside from Cui Qinghe, who was riding a motorcycle, they all jumped into off-road vehicles. They didn't collect the probe balls they had thrown into the mud. They headed straight northwest. Lu seemed to have completely forgotten the topic of fate. She naturally asked the reason for the change. "What are they going to do?" Just listen carefully to the conversation." Luo Nan quickly returned to the technical level. He was like a post-production producer. He selectively provided Lu with enhanced and rendered information images. Of course, he didn't forget to outline the main clues. They discovered an underground river and a lava pipe that runs parallel to this river. This pipe connects two magma chambers beneath the rock formation. It allows the magma chambers to form a link. This kind of terrain is uncommon. It's also very confusing. It just so happens that they can make use of it. So they believe that it's the mighty power of nature. It's the arrangement of fate. Yin Li's soft voice entered his ears. Luo Nan's eyebrows jumped. Why did they go back? When he turned his head to look, he saw that the beautiful woman beside him still had her eyes closed. Her expression was focused, as if those words were just natural sentiments that came from the bottom of her heart. At the same time, the group of horned demons on the wasteland had indeed thrown the possibility of supernatural powers to the back of their minds. Gardner faced the oncoming sandstorm on the off-road vehicle. He raised his voice. 140 kilometers of underground river. That pitiful bag frog must persevere for over 30 kilometers. Otherwise, the underwater thrusters of the probe balls won't be able to reach the bottom of the lake. Fatty Dragon, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, replied coldly, "They will find the relay." In the back seat, Jingxin also shouted against the wind. "Have you followed up on the latest satellite images of that lake? Satellite orbit changes are very expensive. The follow-up satellite relay will take 4 minutes. But don't worry. I have a hunch that the big baby is still restless because of the big furnace under its butt." Gardner slapped the center console and yelled in a tone that no one could understand. It seemed that the latest discovery and the increasing possibilities made his mood more and more comfortable. In fact, this group of people were mostly in the same mood. Even Ma Ho, who had the smell of dirt, couldn't help but reveal a smile on his skinny face as he was given the least space in the back seat. Once again, the horned demon clicked on the satellite image obtained from Gardner's channel. On a clear day, the striking body of water was like boiling water. The center of the lake had white waves and huge bubbles. If it wasn't for a series of intelligence such as the combination of satellite images, geological exploration data, and their own detection results, and a collective brainstorming analysis, it would have been impossible for them to discover the lava transmission network between the two magma chambers. It was even more impossible for them to associate an inconspicuous mud pond with a lake that was 140 kilometers away. This was undoubtedly the work of nature. The possibility of human action could be completely ruled out. Even if they thought about it in the worst-case scenario, it was just a joke by the goddess of fate. How could there be so many coincidental jokes in the world?